Whakalofalaiatu and welcome to a bulletin for BCN News. Leading our news tonight, we have 4 new COVID-19 cases in managed isolation quarantine. Premier Honourable Dalton Tangilangi addressed the country to announce the 4 new cases of COVID-19 amongst the passengers that had arrived on the recent flight on Monday. Premier Tangilangi also announced that as of Tuesday night, Niue has moved from alert code blue to COVID-19 alert code yellow. Here's more on that story. A total of 38 passengers arrived on Monday's flight, while 36 passengers returned negative results on their day 1 testing on Tuesday. 4 passengers returned positive PCR test results. 2 children under 3 years old were not tested but are asymptomatic. All frontline staff who are deemed close contacts of the positive cases are currently in managed isolation quarantine.
In total, Niue has now detected 5 positive cases at the border, being 4 active cases and 1 historical case that has now recovered. The 4 positive cases or active cases are double vaccinated and boosted and had returned negative PCR test 72 hours prior to departure, and rats prior to boarding their flight from Auckland, New Zealand.
Premier Tangilangi also announced the government's decision to move from alert code blue to alert code yellow as of Tuesday evening. Director General of Health and Social Services, Gayleen Tasmania, explains what the alert level yellow means.
Largely, it is business as usual, very similar to the blue alert code that we were under. And the things that we have added are things to look out for in the community. So things like if you feel that you have any of the symptoms, and the good thing is that every household was given that hygiene pack, and in there was a list of the symptoms that people should look out for in both languages, Niue and English. But if you feel that you've got any of those, then please contact the Niue Hospital. We've also, we've continued the community testing drive-through service, which is at Niue Hospital. That's still available every Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday from 10 a.m. to 12. So we're giving that opportunity to help with community surveillance. Again, we don't believe it's out in the community. We're very confident that we have no community cases, but this allows us to validate that belief, and it just also helps to give people reassurance that yes, it's not in the community. So those are the things that has changed, but largely it's based business as usual, and a lot of the blue stuff that we did in the blue alert.
Mrs. Tasmania and Head of Public Health, Griselda Mokoia, were on Radio Sunshine yesterday afternoon talking about the latest cases and keeping the people informed of the protocols and actions the government is taking to contain and eliminate the virus at MIQ. Health officials will continue to monitor and test all the passengers and frontline workers in MIQ according to Niue's COVID testing protocols, while the advice is still the same to remain vigilant and keep practicing good personal hygiene. A special meeting of the Fundraising was held yesterday to discuss and vote of the motion of no confidence in Cabinet that was put forward by Common Role Member Honourable Terry Coe. The motion was defeated by 11 votes to 5.
The 16 members present all spoke after the presentation of the motion by Common Role Member Honourable Terry Coe. The 2 main reasons for the motion was because of the issues on the opening of Niue's borders to tourists and the lack of consultations between Cabinet and the members of the Fundraising on important decisions. The Speaker of the House, Honourable Hima Takelesi, asked the Fundraising members to respect the dedicated time of 10 minutes for each member to speak, while giving Honourable Terry Coe 15 minutes to put forward or to introduce the motion. Those in support of the motion spoke of the lack of consultation from Cabinet on the issue of opening of the borders, and some calling for a temporary pause on the flights from New Zealand. One of the reasons for the motion was the lack of consultation with the members of the Fundraising, many of whom raised concerns at not being consulted about the opening of the new Parliament building while being expected to contribute to the traditional Ngalue Whawhau. In addition, they were not aware of what the actual date is for the opening of Whalefono 2. Different dates were mentioned until the Premier, during his intervention, mentioned that the official opening of the Whalefono will be at the end of April. which is the first time the members of the Whanake learned of the actual opening. Those against the motion said that the vote of no confidence is uncalled for, given that the government has done its best to keep the country free from COVID-19 for 2 years. Ministers also spoke of how difficult it is to be a member of the cabinet during this pandemic, having to do their work knowing that not everyone is satisfied with their efforts. Despite the Speaker's decision that the vote will be by secret ballot, the members all made clear where they stood in support of or against the motion. The outcome was not a surprise, because Honourable Terry Coe told BCN News last week that they may not have the numbers, but it is important to have the debate and to hear their reasons for putting forth the motion of no confidence in Cabinet. The motion was defeated 11 votes to 5.
Cabinet last week changed the pre-departure testing protocols for passengers travelling to Niue. Starting on the 4th of April, the mandatory 72-hour pre-departure PCR tests were now changed to 48 hours prior to the flight. Here's more on that story.
The Cabinet Ministers last week changed the pre-departure testing requirements for passengers in New Zealand wanting to travel to Niue. This change means that the standard 72-hour pre-departure PCR test will now be done 48 hours before the departure of the flight. Director General of Health and Social Services, Gaylene Tasmania, explains.
With Omicron, we're finding that because of the higher transmission rate and the increased viral load in a short period of time, very early in the piece, it's actually better to go down to 48. And so Cabinet last week has approved that our pre-departure tests, the PCR gold standard again we're talking about, will be reduced to 48 hours prior to departure, and that will be commencing on the next passenger flight.
The government is also asking that the message be relayed to families and friends in New Zealand so that they are aware of these changes. There is also a reminder to all passengers intending to come to Niue that they be truthful and honest when they answer the pre-departure questions from the government. Officials have now realised with the last flight that some of the passengers were not honest in their responses to these questions. Responding truthfully to these questions will help minimise the risk of more people bringing the virus to the island. Gaylene Tasmania says that the New Zealand government is also changing and will be relaxing most of their restrictions next month, which means that some of the precautionary measures, like that at the Auckland International Airport, will change. So passengers will have to do their part to help minimise the risk of bringing the virus with them.
The Health Department is now calling on the very few people on the island who have not been vaccinated that the option to vaccinate is still available. Head of Public Health Griselda Mokoia told BCN News that the people who are fully vaccinated and catch COVID-19 experience less severe symptoms compared to those who are not vaccinated. Earlier this week, the Health Department vaccinated 26 people. One of them received their first dose of the Pfizer vaccine, 14 received their second doses, and 11 people took their booster shot. Head of Public Health Griselda explains that the Health Department will continue to encourage those who are not vaccinated, that getting vaccinated is your best defense against COVID-19. Ms. Mokoia said that they have seen and dealt with the first cases of COVID-19 in MIQ. These people are fully vaccinated and their symptoms are not as severe as those who are not vaccinated. For the first case, the symptoms were a sore throat and runny nose. The children 5 to 11 years old will take their second dose of the pediatric version of the Pfizer vaccine on the 12th of April. The annual Ahome of the Australia-Niue was held last Saturday at Millennium Hall in Alofi. 12 villages attended the event this year and raised over $38,000. Here's more on that story.
The Ahome is when the 13 village ecclesias come together to sing hymns and raise money for the work of the church. This year, 12 villages attended and raised more than $38,000, a slight increase of $3,000 from last year's funds. BCN understands that there are 2 main days on the calendar year when the ecclesia will raise money for the church, the Ahome in the first half of the year and the Ahupenyamina in October. This year, the Alofi ecclesia donated the most with more than $7,000. Avasele donated $5,590 and Hakupu $5,331, raised to the fundraising efforts of the day. The smallest ecclesia on the island, Namukulu, with fewer than 10 people in their congregation, donated more than $1,000. The funds collected at the Ahumi goes towards the church fund, which is used to pay the fortnightly stipends of the pastors and the head deacons who lead the village congregations. The Vaie Ecclesia did not participate in the Ahumi this year.
Minister of Finance and Infrastructure Honourable Crossley Tatui and Australia High Commissioner Her Excellency Louise Ellerton met at Whalefono 2 on Monday this week to discuss Niue and Australia's bilateral relationship. According to a press statement from the Office of the Minister, the aim of the meeting was to highlight Niue and Australia's diplomatic relations over the years since setting up a diplomatic office in Niue in May 2020. Honourable Crossley Tatui says the two focus areas between Niue and Australia's relations include increasing accessibility of quality services for the well-being of our people and to build resilience in sustainable budgeting and infrastructure management from natural disasters and climate change impacts. Ms. Louise Ellerton emphasized the importance of growing Niue's International Trust Fund to help support Niue's fiscal sustainability and supporting critical infrastructure, which can deliver clear and sustainable development outcomes. BCN News obtained a copy of the government's financial report up to 31st of December 2021, which recorded donor project funds received by the government over the past 8 months up to end of February this year, where the Australia government provided a total of $1.4 million in support. $800,000 received in October last year for the Wharf project, $400,000 received in January this year to help with the new Parliament building, and in February this year, the Australian government provided an additional $250,000 towards the waste recovery project. The Niue Water Steering Committee hosted a special program for the World Water Day on Tuesday morning at Paluki site, located on Liku Road, just past the Lakepa-Liku intersection. The senior students of Niue High School gathered to participate in the program, along with various government departments. Here's more on that story.
Tuesday this week was internationally recognized as World Water Day. According to government officials, the theme for this year was groundwater is invisible, but its impact is visible everywhere. As climate change gets worse, groundwater will become more and more critical. The senior students of Niue High School, along with various government agencies, such as the Department of Agriculture, Forestry and Fisheries, the Environment Department, Health Department, the Met Office and the Water Division of the Utilities Department, gathered at Paluki to participate in the program. The events of the day involved a few presentations and demonstrations on how water is tested, how groundwater is obtained, and the roles that respective departments play in managing Niue's water.
The majority of the Niue police are now certified in first aid, according to Chief of Police Tim Wilson. In a press release issued by the Niue Police on Tuesday this week, stated that the Niue Police Department is dedicated to providing regular training to the police and NDMO staff. As part of the regular weekly training of the Niue Police, the Niue Health Department provided refresher first aid training that included CPR and an automatic external defibrillator or AED training. The police were also given an automatic external defibrillator. According to the press release, AEDs are life-saving medical devices that allow the general public with very little training and or experience to provide an electrical shock to people who require to save their lives. The Niue Police would like to thank the Niue Health Department for their assistance with the training and the newly installed AED. And that is our news for tonight. Join us again next week, Tuesday, for more Alpha Wangahau Niue Bulletin. Until then, nonofoa moemonuina.